What is good, Ghost Mafians? Welcome back to the Real Talk Podcast with your host, Mr. Ghost, where we're bringing the facts and the truth to the table. And as true light bearers of Jesus Christ, we are shining that light upon the darkness, one episode at a time, ladies and gentlemen. And it is our job here at the Real Talk Podcast to expose the hypocrisy, the lies, and to expose the evil that lies in this fallen world. Ladies and gentlemen, I am so much enjoy doing these. I am so grateful for everyone you guys tuning into these episodes. Do comment down below. I will respond to every comment that is down below. I will have an open conversation with you. Just be respectful. And obviously, I'll be respectful back. Regardless, even if you're disrespectful, I'm still going to treat you with respect. It's just who I am. But obviously, we're going to expose the hypocrisy, the lies, and we're going to expose the truth, you know what I'm saying, and put it all out there. Ladies and gentlemen, today's episode, we're going to cover Antifa. Yep, we're going to touch Antifa, ladies and gentlemen, and we're going to be talking about why Trump might use the Insurrection Act. I think he should. I think we're at that point. We're at a brink of a civil war. Why not? It's been done before all you people out there like, oh, he can't do that. That's a fascist. No, it's been done before here in the U.S. quite a few times, actually. But Antifa stands for anti-fascist. They are a group of people. I consider them an organization because they seem organized. They got chapters throughout the U.S. It was prevalent out in Europe. It's prevalent out there. But here in the U.S., it made its rise in 2010s. Then obviously 2020, it really skyrocketed where like they were burning down cities. Like these Antifa nut jobs were burning down cities, destroying property, hurting people. To me, that's a definition of a terrorist. And Trump labeled him a terrorist, rightfully so. But in today's episode, we're going to go over some ex-posts. We're going to look at a few things. We're going to read an article about Trump possibility pushing the Insurrection Act and why there has been cases for it and why I think Trump should do it. But guys, we are obviously going to go into depth on what is Antifa. So there are a lot of leaders in our country, such as Trump, that is labeling Antifa a terrorist organization. And the main argument for that is that certain Antifa-linked groups throughout our country, certain chapters, are using violent tactics to get their message across. They are destroying property, arson. They are basically fitting the definition of a domestic terrorist. So Trump has all rights to call them that. But the question is, does he have the legal right to label them? And that is up for debate. A lot of people are very supportive of this idea because they are technically terrorizing their communities. But on the other side of the argument, people are trying to say, hey, there is a legal issue here. Antifa isn't an organized group. I believe it is because I watched busloads of Antifa members come off the bus with cute little picket signs, and they come out with all these riot gears. Somebody's funding this. These guys are wearing gas masks, all black uniforms, face coverings. Like, this is a definition of being organized. There is group chats on Discord, on Reddit, of these guys organizing their movements. So that argument could be quickly picked up and thrown out of the window because we have clear evidence of it being organized. And obviously a lot of these people who are like for Antifa and they're really against Trump, and that's the reason they are against Trump. Right? They don't like Trump for some odd reason, whether it's because his old rhetoric. And listen, we can go on and on and on and on and talk about Trump's rhetoric. There's a lot he said in the past I would never agree with. That one statement, grab him by the you-know-what. But every man has had an intrusive thought. Some of our intrusive thoughts, whether you're a man or woman, have come out verbally. But if we were ever to judge somebody based upon their past and their past alone, we're all guilty. We're all sinners, okay? I will never come to understand why God is using Trump for something good. And I will never argue against my father. You know what I'm saying? I'll never argue against his plan. He has a plan. And obviously it's going to work because he's going to take something evil and use it for good. The assassination of Charlie Kirk, which that person was a supporter of Antifa. The shooter in Dallas, Antifa. A lot of these people that were shooting up schools over these past few years, a lot of these transgender shooters were Antifa, inspired per se. So when you really look at it from a bigger, wider perspective, Antifa is a domestic terrorist organization. It's different if you're out there just holding signs saying, hey, we're going to hold the government accountable. We're going to make sure that no president ever becomes a dictator in the United States. I'm supportive of that. But when you are burning down cities and you are hurting people, you are causing social chaos. You're not being civil. You're being very uncivil. You're not willing to have a dialogue and a debate on our ideologies. Then you're a terrorist. Listen, I'm not sugarcoating this. You are terrorizing your community. So understand, when you terrorize your community, you're a terrorist. Okay? I'm not saying every criminal. I mean, me personally, I think there's gangs in the United States that should have this label as well. I can go into details of like a dozen right off the top of my head. And I don't care if they want to end my life. I don't care. I'm a follower of Jesus Christ. I already know where I'm going. My God has my back, so I'm not worried. What does bother me is that this rhetoric from the left, labeling everything a fascist, everything a Nazi, everything Gestapo, and these are politicians, by the way, saying this stuff. I sit here and I'm looking at it from like a wider lens because I'm a former Democrat. I did turn to Republican Party just recently. I was middle. I was not even independent. I wasn't even registered. I'd be working on getting registered as a Republican. And it's because I'm seeing the true values and the true action of each party. Listen, I'm not a mean person. I'm not going to affirm people's ideas. I'm not going to affirm people's behavior. I am for law and order in this country, and I'm seeing that from the right. I'm going to get that from the right. I've said in many episodes, you got to talk the talk as well as walk the walk. If you're going to talk a big talk, you better walk a big walk. You better be able to fill those shoes. You better be able to take action based upon what you're telling us. And listen, I see that with Trump. Trump's had enough. He is like daddy's home, and the misbehaved children are scattering to all corners of the earth, and they are stomping their feet. They're throwing temper tantrums because they don't like the idea that he's making our country better, that he is deporting illegal criminals out of our country. That's where a lot of these protesters are coming from. They're at ICE facilities. They're attacking ICE facilities, okay, which is federal property. So no mayor, no governor can tell the president what to do with federal property. It belongs to the federal government. And in technicality, if Trump wants to deploy the military, the Insurrection Act is one of the biggest tools he has to do so. Because then you can tell every governor, no, I'm doing it. Shut up. You know what I'm saying? You look at the governor of Illinois. I'll be talking about him within the next few episodes. That guy is a clown. He thinks Chicago's safe. The mayor of Chicago, I just did an episode on that one. That guy's a joke. He's a liar. They're deceivers. You're being deceived. I mean, I could sit here for hours, ladies and gentlemen, and just rant on and on and on about this issue. But let's just dive into it. So for several articles, if you made it this far, thank you so much. Just strive down below, hit that bell notification. So this is on Trump's agenda, the public schedule for the president. He is going to have a 3 p.m. meeting. This was about an hour ago. Participates in a roundtable on Antifa, state dining room, White House press pool. So Trump is obviously going to be talking about it at some point today. Obviously, Trump designates, this is from the White House, by the way, he is designating Antifa as a domestic terrorist organization. This is back in September of this year. Section 1, Antifa as a terrorist threat. Antifa is a militarist, anti-anarchist enterprise that explicitly calls for the overthrow of the United States government, law enforcement authorities, and our system of law. It uses illegal means to organize and execute a campaign of violence and terrorism nationwide. To accomplish these goals, this campaign involves coordinated efforts to obstruct law enforcement of federal laws through armed standoffs with law enforcement, organized riots, violent assaults on immigration and customs enforcement, and other law enforcement officers, routine doxing of, and other threats against political figures and activists. Obviously, we've seen the assassination of Charlie Kirk. That is a prime example. Antifa recruits, trains, and radicalizes young Americans to engage in this violent and suppressive of political activity. Then employs elaborate means and mechanisms to shield the identities of its operatives, concealing its funding sources and operations in an effort to frustrate law enforcement and recruit additional members. Individuals associated with acting on behalf of Antifa further coordinated with other organizations and entities for the purpose of spreading and fomenting and advancing political violence and suppressing lawful political speech. We've seen that with Charlie Kirk, ladies and gentlemen. This organization's effort designed to achieve policy objectives by coercion and intimidation is a domestic terrorism. Trump, obviously, this is being broken down into 3 sections. We will discuss section 1. So yes, section 1, ladies and gentlemen, is accurate. We're seeing all that throughout the internet. We are seeing people being violent. We are seeing people doxing federal agents. We witnessed so far this year federal agents out in Los Angeles taking rocks to the windows of their vehicles. We've watched federal agents out in Portland get completely clocked. Just the other day, we witnessed federal agents being pretty much rammed on by a crazy lunatic woman, and I believe her boyfriend did it as well. So, 10 vehicles ramming federal vehicles. That one woman was armed, and she effed around and found out very quickly. I'm very thankful that she's not dead. She will obviously get her chance within court. But at the end of the day, she would have met Jesus a lot quicker than she anticipated because of stupid actions. So Trump is hitting the notes here. He's definitely hitting the notes. Designation as a domestic terrorist organization because of this aforementioned pattern of political violence that's designed to suppress lawful political activity and obstruct the rule of law. I hereby designate Antifa as a domestic terrorist organization. All relevant executive departments and agencies shall utilize all applicable authorities to investigate, disrupt, and dismantle any and all illegal operations, especially those involving terrorist actions conducted by Antifa or any person claiming to act on behalf of Antifa, or for which Antifa or any person claiming to act on behalf of Antifa. Provide material support, including necessary investigatory and prosecutorial actions against those who fund these operations. George Soros, there's quite a few people out there who are funding these. I should have got to this a lot sooner, but obviously a lot's been happening over the past month, and I've just been pumping one episode after another. General provisions. This order shall be implemented consistent with applicable law. This order is not intended to or does not create any right or benefit, substantive or procedural, enforceable at law or iniquity by any party against the United States. It's the department, agencies, entities, the officers, employees, or agents, or any other persons. Signed by our President Trump. Ladies and gentlemen, that's crazy, right? And we're going to look into instances where Antifa is committing violent acts, where we are seeing Antifa members attack federal agents. There was a person by the name of Christopher Hudson. He calls himself Julia Winters. And yeah, I'm not making that up. This is another person who is transgender. And listen, there's no hate for these people. There's no hate at all. Pray for those who are afflicted. Pray for those who are battling demons. Pray for those who are demonically possessed. There's something going on in the spiritual world. There is a war between good and evil. We are seeing it today. We've been seeing it for a while, and a lot of people are being afflicted by Satan Trump's the dominions, and we're seeing it time and time again. So once again, when I talk about transgenders or I talk about those in the LGBT, ABC community, it doesn't come from a side of hate. It comes from a side of compassion. You guys know where I stand with that. I don't believe in it. I'm not going to affirm it. You know, I'm not going to hate you. I'm not going to go against you. But at the same time, I'm not going to live in that fantasy that this is the right way to live life, because that's not how God intended it for us. But anyways, we're going to look at Christopher's shenanigans, and we will go on from there. Breaking: the first of the Portland Antifa ICE rioters has been federally convicted. This individual, by the name of, he goes by Julia Winters, but his real name is Christopher Hudson, has pleaded guilty. So Christopher pled guilty to a felony intimidation of a federal officer, resisting arrest. Other serious charges were dropped as part of a plea deal. Well, Mr. Hudson had to take a plea deal because he threw a knife at law enforcement. This is his face after he got tased. We'll watch that video in a second. Right here for immediate release from the Department of Justice, Portland, Oregon. Defendant, oh boy, I don't like this. I don't think people, okay, Christopher Hudson. Defendant Christopher Hudson, 447 of Portland, pled guilty yesterday to felony intimidation of a federal officer and resisting arrest. According to court documents, on June 24th of 2025, so he did this a while back, Winters brandished a large knife and swung it back and forth at officers in an attempt to intimidate the officers when they engaged with this Hudson at the Immigration Enforcement Center in South Portland. Remember, the mayor of Portland said Portland's very peaceful. So keep that in mind. On August 20th of this year, Mr. Hudson reported to the pretrial services offices after violating the conditions of their pretrial release, as federal law enforcement attempted to arrest Mr. Hudson on a federal warrant. He resisted arrest by causing forcible contact with U.S. deputy marshals. After the U.S. marshal attempted to place the defendant under arrest, he'll be sentenced in December of 2025 before the U.S. District Court. These are the evidence. This is what he looks like now. That's what he looks like after being tased. Real quick, we're gonna watch this quick 49-second take on this, and you guys are, please don't laugh at the person being tased, because at the end of the day, this is a mentally ill individual who's never gotten services and never got the help that they need. And by the way, there's no audio. And give the officers a lot of credit for not using lethal force, because they could have. You know, this dude literally had like a big knife. You know what I'm saying? And there he is. He if you guys watch there for a second, you go back, okay? Hold on, let's go back a little bit more. And we're gonna watch, like, in slow motion, you know, this person literally chucks the knife at the officer, and thank God the officer did not get hurt. Then right there, the person gets tased. And as I said, you know, you F around, you end up finding out of what it means to be designated a terrorist. You know, we are not playing around no more, ladies and gentlemen. We are not. The United States will hold those accountable who are trying to break the law. You are not allowed to break the law in any country, let alone here in the United States. When we don't sit there, when we don't help these people, get them the mental health services they need, and we keep feeding their ear this rhetoric that the other side is the enemy and you gotta take them out, they do stupid things. And give the officers a lot of credit that they didn't open fire, because it would have been justified, because you're meeting deadly force with deadly force. Thank God that Mr. Hudson can survive the tasing, you know, so survive those bumps and bruises, but he will face accountability within court, no doubt about it. Now we're going to look at some more things from the Antifa side of things. This is an organized rally coming out of Philadelphia. back in October 3rd to the 5th. So this is already past done. Applying radio technology. We're going to zoom in it if we can. Oh, it's not going to let us. Okay. Let's just bring it back to a 100. Applying radio technology, mediations on drug use and liberation. Let that sit in. You know, this is why I believe Antifa to be this is a criminal organization. You know what I'm saying? Federate social media for anarchist 101, making mending and creative reuse, clothing ourselves outside of capitalism, community care through symptomatic and breath work, invisibility for cyberpunks, hiding from drones, thermal and night vision. Yeah, I think these are people who've taken video gaming way too serious. Seed saving practices, off-grid basics, a discussion and workshop for short-term and medium-term outdoor living. Don't turn yourself in. Be fugitive. Represses. Preparedness material. Pre-fugitive practices to resist state coercion. Ladies and gentlemen, this is training 101, how to be a terrorist. You guys know in one of my last episodes, you could check out that episode. It is by Nick. It's the Nick Sorter arrest. I covered that in that episode. And, you know, he ended up posting himself, you know, right here. If we quickly switch over real quick, you know, hey, Antifa, just FYI, the more times you assault me, the higher the chances you have of active duty Marines deployed to the streets of Portland by the end of the week. Just saying. And obviously you have another Antifa member here. We're going to quickly go through some of these. You know, this Antifa member here, I will not apologize for what I've said about Charlie Kirk. This is way back in September. Sorry, not sorry. Dude preached violence towards transgender folks. He preached the eradication of transgender folks. He effing reaped what he effing sowed. See, it's rhetoric like that by these mentally ill individuals, right? These guys are mentally ill. It is this rhetoric, these lies. Listen, Charlie Kirk has never once called for the eradication of transgender folks. He called for sympathy. He called for compassion. He was preaching to people that this is not a way to live. To mutilate your body just to feel affirmed within your own mind? Our minds are battlefields. We are fighting principalities within our minds, between good and evil. That's why you got good thoughts, you got evil thoughts. And if you allow the evil thoughts to continuously get hold, eventually they will capture your heart. And your heart will grow cold towards the Lord. Then what? Eternal damnation. We got to stop the rhetoric. Obviously, this is out in Europe, by the way. Antifa's out there. This individual has been granted immunity by the European Parliament. She's a member of the infamous Antifa Hammer Gang, which attacks right-wing politicians and activists with hammers. Once again, Portland refused to arrest Antifa militia threw a cup of urine in somebody's face. I don't want to hear the garbage. Yeah, see, right there. That's a crime. So yeah, you know, it's clear. It's very clear that Antifa is a terrorist organization. There's no hiding behind a mask. There's no more sugarcoating it. They are an evil terrorist organization. You know what I'm saying? This is not me being hyperbolic. This is not me trying to like aspirate the situation. This is just truth facts. These guys are afflicted with evil spirits. They're acting amok. They are acting evil. It's very evil to throw a knife at somebody. It's very evil to throw urine on somebody. It's very evil to try to hurt your fellow human being. That's not of God. That's not of good. That is of evil. So with that being said, Trump is now considering Insurrection Act. And before people get all like wet and willy and all upset about this, do understand this has happened before. We've had multitude of presidents pretty much releasing this. Let's run them through. Okay, we're going to run through Thomas Jefferson, Andrew Jackson, Abraham Lincoln, Ulysses S. Grant, Rutherford B. Hayes, Chester A. Arthur, Grover Cleveland, Woodrow Wilson, Warren Harding, Douglas MacArthur, FDR done it. Dwight Eisenhower's done it. John F. Kennedy's done it. Lyndon B. Johnson's done it, as well as Ronald Reagan, as well as George H.W. Bush. So before you guys get all up in arms saying Trump can't do this, this is un-American, it's been done before. We are at a point of civil unrest in the United States of America. And I'm a firm believer that there are sleeper cells in the United States of America. I'm a firm believer that we're on the verge of either a civil war or the enemy is going to strike us. Once again, I could go back to the Smith-Mundy Act, right? I constantly go back to that because the more I look and the more that I dive into this, what's been happening, it goes back to 2012. And yes, in the 2010s, Antifa was slowly climbing. But I've witnessed since the removal of the Smith-Mundy Act, which made it legal to put propaganda. Well, they modernized it, they said, but at the end of the day, they pretty much made it legal to propaganda against the American people. And what have we witnessed since then? The rhetoric that the right are the enemy, which ultimately started the Tea Party movement with Charlie Kirk, being a small part of that, and eventually Turning Point USA turned into what it is today, in which I'm going to be a proud member of. I am going to be speaking as a voice of reason, as a voice of truth. And at the end of the day, we got to support our president. We're going to read that article, and we're going to understand that the president can deploy the military in the United States of America. All right, let's get into reading, ladies and gentlemen. I always like reading, right? President Donald Trump says he'd consider declaring an insurrection inside the United States, accusing Democratic governors and mayors of preventing the federal government from enforcing immigration laws and turning their cities into war zones. Chicago, a great city where there's a lot of crime, Trump told reporters on Tuesday. And if the governor can't do the job, we'll do the job. It's all very simple. Invoked an Insurrection Act would unfurl extraordinary presidential powers to use military force in American cities in a manner not used since the Civil Rights Movement. That's a lie. It was 1992, by the way, the Rodney King riots. I'm sure if ABC forgot that. It also would potentially pit troops from a Southern Republican-run state against a Northern Democratic-run cities and states. They're trying to make it sound like we're going to have a second civil war, ladies and gentlemen. That is not true. It's just we got to bring law and order back to our streets. Some 200 National Guard troops from Texas were preparing to deploy to Chicago this week. Administration officials told the federal judge this week, who agreed not to block the deployments for now. Yeah, well, we have a problem with our federal judges, and I think a lot of them are corrupt. That accelerates the situation quite a bit. Catherine Konimsky, Director of Studies at Center for New American Security, said of the deployment of Texas troops to Chicago. It creates a tinderbox, she said. Once again, I don't think it does. It's going to show enforcement. We watched what happened out in L.A., Under the law, the president can use military troops to protect federal buildings and federal employees, but they can only conduct domestic law enforcement if they remain under control of the state governors. A major exception to those constraints is the Insurrection Act, which Trump said he would be open to invoking if people were getting killed and if Democrat-run states like Illinois and Oregon were holding us up, which they are. It was signed into law in 1807 by President Thomas Jefferson that the law allows the president to deploy military troops inside the U.S. to act as law enforcement and quell an insurrection that threatens a state or its residents. So, ladies and gentlemen, we are seeing those threats today. We're seeing residents being threatened. We're seeing structures being damaged. We're seeing federal agents, federal employees. We're seeing that. If I can enact it, I do, said Trump. If people were being killed and the courts were holding us up, or governors or mayors were holding us up, sure, I'd do it. In an interview on Newsmax, Trump said he wouldn't invoke the law if he didn't have to. At the same time, he told the outlet what would happen is pure insurrection. And obviously you have Praxer here. This guy is a joke. We'll be having a video on him soon. Illinois Democratic Governor J.B. Pritzker also has called allegations of civil unrest in his state complete BS. We've seen the videos, ladies and gentlemen. We watched a woman ram her vehicle into federal agents. That's civil unrest, and has pushed back against the arrival of Texas troops as an unconstitutional invasion of Illinois by the federal government. It's another lie. It's not. The president has the authority to do so because you are not getting things under control. If Trump declares an insurrection in Illinois, it would mark the first time a president has invoked the law without a governor's consent since Lyndon Johnson did to protect civil rights activists in 1965 in Alabama. Since then, the law has been invoked at the governor's behest, including in 1992 during the riots in California, following the acquittal of officers accused of beating motorist Rodney King. I still think that's BS. Those officers should have been charged, but that is the past. Can't change the past, can't affect the future. I have to focus on the here and now to try to affect the future. God knows the future. He knows everything. On Monday, both Texas GOP Governor Greg Abbott and senior Trump aide Stephen Miller echoed Trump's accusations that Chicago was a war zone and blamed Democratic politicians as refusing to enforce federal laws. We have local states refusing to enforce the law, and we have chaos, Abbott said in an interview on Fox News with host Sean Hannity. Miller, who has led Trump's push for mass deportations inside the United States, directly accused local officials of trying to undermine the federal government. We've seen that continuously. We're almost there, guys. Bear with me. There is an effort to delegitimize the core function of the federal government of enforcing our immigration laws. We talked about that. We talked about the federal government is the United States government is the only government that can enforce immigration laws. You can't make up your own. If you're a mayor, you're a governor, you can't make up your own. That's under federal authority and our sovereignty, he said in an interview on CNN on Monday. It is domestic terrorism. It's an insurrection, Miller added. Kaninsky, with the Center of New American Security, said the president has broad authority to invoke the Insurrection Act, but after Democratic-led states inevitable sue in court, a judge would likely press Trump to provide evidence that an insurrection has occurred. See, this is the problem. This is another thing I want to talk about with you guys in another episode about these federal judges. They got to stop, because eventually you're going to lead to a point where we're going to have to declare martial law. I think a lot of federal judges should be impeached. In the case of Illinois, it's possible that Trump administration would point to the rebellion as coming from Pritzker and other Democratic politicians themselves. He has evidence of that, ladies and gentlemen. Pritzker said at a news conference on Monday that he believes invoking the Insurrection Act is part of Trump's plan. Not really. Trump has said numerous times he would not do it if he don't have to. But you are obviously playing into his hands. We'll talk about that in a second. The Trump administration is following the playbook, cause chaos, create fear and confusion, makes it seems like peaceful protesters are a mob by firing gas pellets and tear gas canisters at night, Pritzker told reporters. Why to create a pretext for invoking the Insurrection Act? So that he can send military troops into our city, he added. Kaninsky said there is a reason why federal government should move cautiously when thinking about unleashing military might in American cities. We're proud of the fact that we are trained for the world's most lethal force, Kaninsky said. And that's why we have such firm boundaries on the use of it in law enforcement. All right, guys, that was a lot to read. I think it killed my throat, as you guys could tell. But Trump is right. He can invoke it. And how? Well, we look out in Portland, Oregon. We're seeing civil unrest. You know what I'm saying? And obviously Pritzker throws out the narrative, well, they're tear gassing. Are you showing them what's happening before tear gas is launched? Are you showing the rocks being thrown to the windows? Are you seeing the violent mobs This is prior to tear gas. This is prior to them, coming out of the building saying, let's do this. The lies. I don't know how you could live and, how can I say this in a very light way? How can you live with yourself when you know you're a compulsive liar? Makes no sense to me. Have it make sense in the comments, guys, because to me, it just don't. Title 32, okay, we are going to talk about the presidential authority, okay? Title 32 establishes and affirms that the National Guard units are controlled by their respective state governors by default, right? While the Guard remains under state command, the Pois Comotus Act, if I've said that wrong, roast me, please, does not apply. However, under 10 U.S.C. 12406, the president may place a state's National Guard under federal command. The United States is invaded, or if there's a rebellion or a danger of rebelling against the federal authority, the president is unable to enforce federal law with existing forces. So, ladies and gentlemen, here we have it. We're finally at my concise. Mr. President, go for it. Unleash the dogs. Unleash the army. Unleash the American force upon the criminals here in the United States of America. I'm a firm believer in law and order. Federal authorities having a hard time dealing with these kooks, these Antifa nut jobs. Okay? But sending in the military might go one or two ways. I'm not going to hide. I'm not going to sit there and sugarcoat it. It can go south very quickly, where it would lead to a civil war, 100%. Do I believe that would happen? Not really. These Antifa people will fold very quickly. Because I can promise you, the second any Antifa member thinks of opening fire on a U.S. Marine, you're going to get clapped so hard. You're going to, I want to say something, but it's not Christian-like. I'll hold that back. But you will get clapped really hard. And trust me, there's no mercy word. You're not going to scream out your safe word and think it's going to stop. We are not the ones, my friend. We are not. We are not intimidated. We are not scared. We are patriots of this country. My uncle died for this country. I had friends die for this country. My family bled for this country, including my native heritage, fought on behalf of the Americans. We're not the ones. Governors, mayors, if you don't want the federal government to send in the troops, get your act together and work with him. Get the illegals out, bring down your crime, tell these Antifa nut jobs to go home and get a job, take a shower, shave your hair, shave your beard. It's ridiculous, ladies and gentlemen. At the end of the day, they're playing into Trump's cards. Trump already said he don't want to use this, but if the governors are going to constantly resist, and if a judge is going to constantly resist, he's going to do it. And he has all rights to. He has the authority to do. We're at a point of a rebellion against the United States of America. The majority of us voted for Trump. He won the popular and the electoral college. With that being said, ladies and gentlemen, Trump is our president, and I stand behind him. And you should too, because America should come first. Our values should come first. With that being said, ladies and gentlemen, God bless you. Give me your take, your concise statement down below. I want to hear from you guys. Let's have an open, respectful conversation on how you feel about this. God bless you guys, and I'll see you all in the next. Don't forget to subscribe, bell notification, hit that like button, and I'll see you all then.